My name is Lisa Reber. It's Lisareber, which is the same forwards as backwards. And my husband and I are the former owners of the mill.
Nathan Babb, Nathan Babb, Boyertown Area Historical Society Board of Directors and Boyertown Area Historical Society Archaeology Division.
My name is Mark C., middle initial Heist, M-A-R-K, middle initial C, H-E-I-S-T. I'm a member of the Board of Directors with Boyertown Area Historical Society as of February of this year, 2024.
We saw a listing in a real estate book. It said, own a piece of history. And it's like, oh, you know, sucker. There's a line to draw somebody in. So figured out where it was. And my husband came, that was maybe Monday. My husband came by on Wednesday, and Mr. Bahr, Gordon Bahr, who was Raymond's son, saw him with his nose pressed up against the window there in the back. And he said, oh, would you like to see inside? And my husband's like, oh, heck yeah. And, you know, he got a tour, and he was gobsmacked, might be a good word, and said, so what would you want for not just the building, but the contents too? And Mr. Bahr said, you'd want all this? I was like, what do I do with a building without all this stuff in? And pretty much had a handshake deal at the end of that week.
I first became involved with the mill by being on the board of directors for the Boyertown Historical Society. We had the opportunity to buy the mill and help preserve it.
I first became involved with the mill. I was asked to come out and be on the mill committee, and this was when they were in the process of buying it at the time. And I guess I kind of faded away, and then I was asked to come back. Rachel Keeler, president of the society, contacted me and asked if I'd come on and be a board member with an emphasis on the Bahr's Mill.
My main goal for participating in the documentary is to get all of the accumulated nonsense and knowledge and just little stories that came through to me out of my head and recorded someplace where they'll be saved.
My goal is for public outreach and to get the community involved and have people learn the history of the mill.
Yeah, my goal for creating this documentary is to produce something that it does not exist right now. We no longer have the Bahr brothers or their father or anybody else to tell us about this. And I think that the closest thing we have is the very knowledgeable Lisa Reber. Her and her husband owned this property for, I think, about 20 years. I think I want to add to that it's really, we're trying to produce a piece of history, an educational piece of history, so that we have a good understanding of how the mill operated and also the surrounding area.
Finding a lot of people to watch the video is one challenge, and you know, like any nonprofit, the Historical Society needs to find volunteers who want to watch the video and learn and keep the information going.
One of the challenges is getting the community involved and, you know, getting volunteers to help.
There's a lot of challenges. First of all, there were a lot of John Gables. There were 3 different mills that the Gables ran. And when you start to do your research, you're not sure which John they're talking about, which mill they're talking about. and it just gets very confusing.
For me, failure is kind of the big picture where the mill got turned into a house. That would be horrible.
Failure looks like there's nobody coming around. People wouldn't be interested.
I don't see any kind of a failure in creating the documentary unless it would come out and not have accurate information in it. Like I said in my last statement, it's like we need the accuracy, and it's hard to get.
Getting the mill itself back would be a huge success, almost to how it would have been even in the 1960s when the Bahr brothers were still alive and only in their 70s and puttering around. That would be a very cool thing. So this may be a step in that direction.
Success looks like people being interested, people coming here, enjoying what they're seeing and learning.
Success looks like something that the documentary will really keep people's attention, and they find it interesting, and it correlates very well with what you can see on the video.
The best advice I can give for somebody accomplishing this goal is do your research, learn about what you're telling people, and just get the knowledge in your head so you can pass it on to other people.
The advice for somebody to accomplish these kind of goals is to do your research really well, and you're just going to have to know it's going to consume a lot of your time. So stick with it.
Heinrich Gable would have been here when the first mill, the linseed oil mill, was built. It was on his estate inventory in 1827, 1828 when he died. Johannes/John was his son, and there's a whole list of names that go on. Jacob Bahr was born in 1863, which sticks in my head for some reason because in the middle of a war, people are still marrying and having babies. And I know that Mary, who became his wife, was the only surviving Gable child from this branch of the Gables. And I think she had kids who didn't make it. I know one kid died in his 20s or something, but the other two lived to be well into their 90s, 98 and 102, I think. So they did okay. The big picture for the mill was that I think it was 1799, the Gable family bought the property, knew they were going to be putting a mill on here. At some point, they built the linseed oil mill. That was here by 1828 when the first Gable died. And his son took over, didn't actually live that much longer than he did, which was sad. But you read stories about mills and you read stories about industrial accidents and death. They added the sawmill building, which is not here anymore, but we have at least a couple pictures of it. Around 1860, don't know exactly. And then they brought in the cast iron spoke making machinery in probably 1871. In 1872, in Boyertown, a carriage factory started up, so it may be that Swinehart knew the Gables and they collaborated. And by 1897, Jacob Bahr had married the only surviving Gable child, and the Bahr brothers were born, but they tore down the old linseed oil building and built this building, and it's actually laid out to accommodate the 4 cast iron machines that are here. So basically the building was built around the machinery, or designed that way. Wood depends on the job. Wheel hubs would have been elm because it's apparently a very tangled grain, and when you're putting all these holes in for the spokes and then another hole through the middle for the axle, you have to worry about it exploding. Spokes, I think, were hickory, and rims, I am not sure. The grain that was processed here, I know because of the corn cobs that they ground cornmeal. And I talked to one old gentleman in town who said, when I was a boy, we came here and we had buckwheat ground. And I said, pancakes? And he goes, oh no, scrapple. The impact on the economy, I kind of always operated under the assumption that there was a regular exchange between here and the carriage factory that is what became the Boyertown Auto Body Works.
Well, the mill contributed to the economy and the population because it was part of you could call it a complex, you could call it a small village, and I've even heard it described as a hamlet, which is a small village. But here in Gablesville, it consisted of, this was originally an oil mill. We had the general store across the street. Across the other street, we had the sawmill. Next to the general store was a harness maker who did also shoe repairing, as we understand it at this point. There was another grist mill down the road. There was a local schoolhouse. Probably missing something, but I don't know. Ice house, yes, ice house. And post office in the general store, which was very common in small villages. I'm getting that from my reading. So let me continue with that for a second, because it's really when you're going back to the 1800s and the neighborhoods are pretty much open, spread apart a lot. This little complex or hamlet or village, it provided a place where people could get goods and services. They were able to socialize with other people. And it was kind of a meeting place. You know, you might come, drop your shoes off to be repaired, pick up some ice, get a pick handle for one of your farm tools. It's just different. Now you'd go to a mall or a strip mall or that kind of thing. Not the same.
I think it's a cool personal connection. The general store that's across the street, it was still open yet when I was a kid and grew up just over the hill, and I used to ride my bicycle down there to get ice cream.
What kind of ice cream?
I usually got a Chipwich.
I really just enjoy the history of the mill. I enjoy meeting the people that come here. And the more we get the mill out there, I think the more successful we're going to be. One of the biggest problems in my mind is how we are going to preserve this. Right now, we're all volunteers.
Having the water wheel inside is typical for Northern European, i.e. German, mill construction. And when you look at other mills in the US, in the South, the wheels are on the outside, they didn't have to worry about freezing. There was a long-handled chisel kind of thing downstairs, and someone suggested that maybe that was something they could use to chop ice if they had some water, but in my tenure it never got to the point of freezing in the basement except the pipes once. So that having the mill pond freeze was one of the things that affected the usability of the mill, of any water-powered structure. After the dam washed out in 37 or 38, they would power the mill with a tractor parked behind the building and a belt going from the power takeoff up to one of the wheels over by the duplicating lathe. And the duplicating lathe is actually where it is because it's closest to the power source. It's the big power hog, and then as you work your way farther away, they get smaller. The first mill that was here was the linseed oil mill. It's funny, a lot of the history of the mill has to do with the economy changing and oops, we need to find something else that's going to make us money. History hat, sorry. As more and more cotton was being produced, linen was falling out of favor, less flax plants were being grown, and people would rather buy cotton cloth than go through all the steps involved in making their own linen fabric. So adding the sawmill in the 1860s was another income stream. Then they had all this wood. Apparently they owned a lot of wood lots in the area, and so they had a supply of wood. It's like, oh, war's over, things are maybe picking up a little bit. There's this company in Philly that builds these spoke making machines. They bring them up here on the train and haul them out in the wagon. So that was going great guns, and it was 1897, close to when Ford was building his first prototype cars. They decided to tear down that first mill building, build this one, and not, as it turned out, the greatest decision in the history of decisions. At some point in the teens or 20s, I think, they brought in the rake-making machinery and very likely had a contract with the Reading Hardware Company, I forget where I learned it, but somebody said something about loading up a Model T pickup with a whole bunch of the wooden hay rakes and driving them to Reading to be sold at the Reading Hardware Company. After the war, after Jake Bahr died, the brothers, who also had a general store across the street for another income stream, but they got a contract with the Boyertown Burial Casket Company to saw wood, and actually talked to a man who went to Africa and brought back mahogany. So they were sawing full-time, mostly shut down the mill. When they closed the sawmill, they came back and started using the rake-making machinery on a more regular basis.
The efforts that I'm involved in right now to restore the mill are, we have an archaeology project going right now. We have a few units opened up where we're digging and finding artifacts. Challenges we have with the archaeology project are getting volunteers to come and help. It's open to the public. We have a few people that have been coming out to help, but the more the merrier. Future plans that we have for the dig is to open up more units. We would like to open up some units down at the mill pond, see if we could find some fishing equipment from kids that may have fished down there, and hopefully maybe even find some Native American artifacts. One of the most memorable artifacts that we found so far was a Pepsi bottle. Unfortunately, it wasn't complete, it's in pieces, but from the markings that were on it, we were able to put a solid date to it. It's the first thing that we could put a solid date to that we were digging so far. So with some research, we found out that it was from 1957. We have found some stuff that is definitely older, but nothing that we could put a solid date to. We have found some redware that can go from the mid 1700s up until the late 1800s, early 1900s.
The mill is currently used now to give tours. We started tours in the last week of April of this year, 2024, and we're open to the public free of charge from 10 to 2. There are a number of us that are able to give the tours with accuracy, I must add, and every single person that I've had come through here, they just find it they look in here and they are just in awe. And some people even ask, well, where did you get all this equipment? Or has this always been in here? And yes, it's always been in here. And as far as maintenance, we are fortunate to have a timber framer and very knowledgeable person right on our board who most recently has repaired or restored or replaced half a dozen of the windows here. I think that the most important or best thing that was done early on, I think that was in the fall of last year, was I feel, stabilized the building by getting a new roof on it and a rebuild of the cupola as well.
The mill's role in the community in the future would be, I'd like to see this open on a more regular basis as a museum, have people come in and enjoy what they see.
One lesson that I would, 2020 hindsight, if I could do it over again, would be to build a good team. I am not the queen of marketing, and having an organization like the Boyertown Area Historical Society in charge now is it's a good thing.
The most rewarding aspect of being involved at the mill is getting involved with the community, having people come out and enjoy what they're seeing, especially having some kids come out and getting to see some kids that are actually interested in what's going on here.
I go back to having it turned into a house. To be part of saving that from happening, it's a good thing. It's a legacy of a sort, I guess.